Hello everyone and welcome to this Global Fleet Champions Spotlight session on sustainability and fleets. So a big thank you to the sponsors of the Sustainable Journeys Award at our Fleet Champions Awards, Fleet Coach, who are sponsoring this session, and we'll be hearing from them shortly. If you're new to our webinars, Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Brake, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work. To learn more about the work that we do and to access fleet safety resources and more events, please visit globalfleetchampions.org. And if you're not already a member, you can sign up for free on the website. And if you've not come across Brake before, we're a road safety charity working to prevent road deaths and injuries, make communities safer and support people bereaved and injured in crashes through a range of initiatives, one of which is Global Fleet Champions. So moving swiftly on to our speakers, firstly, I'd like to introduce Jim Peterson from Fleet Coach to give a short introduction. Over to you, Jim.
Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from sunny Canterbury. That backdrop is one of New Zealand's newest roads, not far from where I live, and the weather is just like that today. Anyway, thank you, Caroline. Many of us have had that moment when we saw or heard something and it caused a thought to enter our heads that changed how we thought about a whole lot of things all at once, something that really shook our world, and an epiphany. Well, I had an epiphany back in 2021. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, a series of Australian bushfires went out of control. The pictures and the commentary made me wonder, what if the fires get so big that they consume enough oxygen that there isn't enough left for us to breathe? I'm a bit of a catastrophizer, as you can tell, but I just realized that the resources we need to survive on Earth are finite, and we need to live our lives in ways to preserve them. We also realize that how we live our lives affects the temperature of the planet. And of course, that leads to things like more natural fires, and they in turn heat the planet up even more and consume even more oxygen. You can see which way my brain goes. But in short, it just reminded me that all these things are connected, and we're connected to it, to the planet. We can't pretend that what we do has no effect. And so that was my epiphany. That's why sustainability became really important to me at that point. Now, while we at Fleet Coach help companies keep their drivers safe, we're also conscious that mechanized transport, both in the supply chain and in the activity itself, consumes resources and affects the environment. We train people to drive more safely, which is more fuel efficient, and it also helps us consume less tires and brakes and slows down the damage to the roads. So we're doing our bit, we believe, or a bit, to lower our environmental impact. But on top of that, we're always curious to know what else we can do to be more sustainable when we drive. And that's why we sponsor this presentation and why we can't wait to hear from Kirsten today. It's also why we sponsor the Sustainable Journeys Award at the Australasian Fleet Champions Awards. We really want to celebrate the good work that's being done and encourage people to share what they're doing to be more sustainable. And we had the pleasure of awarding Kirsten's organisation that prize last year, and we can't wait to see who the winners are this year. So that's why we're here, but that's enough from me. Let's hear from the experts. Back to you, Caroline.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Jim. Yeah, really appreciate you sponsoring this session and the Sustainable Journeys Award. And we'll move swiftly on to our next speaker and the main presentation for today. So I'm delighted to introduce Kirsten Corson, and Kirsten is co-founder and director of Zilch, which uses smart technology to help businesses decarbonise their mobility. Kirsten's also the deputy chair of Drive Electric, which is an industry group supporting the uptake of electric mobility. And as Jim just mentioned, Zilch were the winners of the Sustainable Journeys Award at the Australasian Fleet Champions Award in 2022. So it's fantastic to have Kirsten along today. Thanks very much for joining us, Kirsten.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks, Jim. Also, it's a really nice segue into what Zilch does as well. So, kia ora koutou, and thank you to everyone tuning in today. Lovely to have you with us. So, I'm going to share my screen and just give you a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation. Nothing too hefty for you. Appreciate it's the afternoon. Have a bit of Q&A. And talk through it. So I know many of you on today's webinar are involved with managing fleets, and I guess the big piece that we talk about at Zilch is that shift from fleet thinking to mobility thinking, because really that's what we need to do to create a sustainable platform for our transport moving forward. It's no longer all about the cars, and we'll talk through that. For those of you who don't know Zilch, we've been in business for 8 years, has been our journey, and we support businesses to decarbonise their mobility. We focus on our Scope 1 products is what we started with, and we're, I guess, most commonly known for our EV public car sharing in Christchurch and in Auckland, but our EMAS model, which is EV Mobility as a Service for businesses, is actually the biggest part of our operation. So we work with customers, Xero, ASB, Genesis, Christchurch City Council. We provide electric vehicles on a monthly rate. We provide charging infrastructure, and those businesses, we're focused on them rationalising their fleet, optimising it, so opening those cars up for business bookings and also private bookings after hours, where they can earn revenue off them and optimise the asset, because we certainly see that there's an ESG responsibility for businesses to support their employees inside the office to decarbonise when they're doing business trips, but also support them to make smarter mobility decisions outside the office as well. We also have our first Scope 3 product coming to the market. It's just about to release, and that's focusing on the staff commute, measuring that, and then creating training and education modules and incentivising staff members to change their behaviour. So that's the Zilch platform as it stands today, and it's exciting, I guess, challenging and innovating the market, because we've got some big problems to solve. And I just wanted to do a bit of a recap on what we see as some of the big problems we've got. In New Zealand, the size of our engines has steadily got bigger over the last 2 decades, and our vehicles number has also increased. We've got more cars than people in New Zealand, than adults, and so it's our fastest growing contributor to our greenhouse gas footprint, which when you think about it, transport's 17% of our footprint, and many of you tuned in today from your businesses, it'll be around 40% of your carbon footprint as a average of what it sits at across the business community. And it's actually our easiest one to target. And I know a lot of you will be sitting there going, well, actually, it's not that easy to change a fleet. And you're absolutely right. I guess what I'm saying by that is it's easier than addressing our greenhouse gas emissions from the primary sector. That's going to be a lot longer journey for our country. So transport's the one that the majority of commentators are saying, if we can hit our transport targets and get to a zero footprint, we'll be able to meet our Paris Agreement targets in 2050. And obviously we've got targets to hit in 2030 as well. And for Zilch, a big piece is looking at financial sustainability. So if we were to just take our ICE vehicles, our internal combustion engine vehicles, our diesel and petrol ones off the road, and replace them with EVs, it's going to cost the country over $100 billion over the next 25 years. And that's the stats out of the Climate Change Commission. So when you think about it, for New Zealand at the moment, we've got over $30 billion invested in our vehicle fleet. but we're only using those cars less than 5% of the time. And the other quite alarming stat in New Zealand is a third of our trips are 2 kilometres or less. So that's quite different from North America and also Asia and Europe. So we've got this great opportunity to innovate there and adapt, adopt more active transport. Because our fleet is also so old, we've got one of the oldest fleets in the OECD. We've got a really high emission footprint from our fleet in New Zealand. The average age of a car in New Zealand is 15 years. And that old fleet has a really low safety rating as well compared to global fleets, which Caroline would be able to talk to as well. The stats also that came out in 2022 research was we've got over 2,000 Kiwis that are dying each year directly attributable to our emissions from our vehicles. So when you think about last year, we lost 378 people on our roads. That's what our road toll was. But we're also losing, over 2,000 people as well. So it's the effect that transport is having on Kiwis, and Caroline would obviously be able to talk to this, and the great work that Break is doing in this space is just so important. When you think the social cost of just the transport deaths from emissions is well over $10 billion a year. So I guess what I'd like you guys tuned in today to pick up on is we really need to move faster. We only need to see what's been happening with flooding and fires in North America, Asia and Europe, that and also Gabrielle this year as well, that climate change is really here, as Jim alluded to in his presentation as well. So the opportunity for all of you that are managing fleets is actually critical and really important. And there's a great opportunity for you to all to be able to lead change. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you think about New Zealand at the moment, we spend over that should be $9 billion. I just recognised that. Over $9 billion a year is spent in the petrochemical industry in New Zealand, and the majority of that is heading offshore. So we've got this great opportunity in New Zealand if we can reduce our fleet, if we can mode shift, and we can decarbonise the rest of our fleet. There's a substantial financial, environmental and social win for Kiwis if we can reduce that $9 billion that's leaving our country and actually keep that in the country. That's a significant opportunity for us. And for those of you who know me, I am a real EV geek, it's fair to say, but we've got to be honest about this, that electrification isn't going to solve all of our problems. We can't keep doing what we've always done, and it's time we actually did innovate and think differently. And I can't stress enough the importance of the leaders in our organisation really need to stand up and lead, because changing mobility in a business is actually really challenging. It gets spoken about at the boardroom table, and it gets spoken about in the water cooler and in everywhere in between. So it's important that our senior leadership teams, our execs, our governance really support the change that the fleet and procurement teams are doing in our businesses to I guess, walk the talk and adopt different forms of mobility, which I'll talk to as well in this presentation. Because to get our staff to change their mobility practices isn't easy, and it's a multi-pronged approach. So this slide really talks about we're going to need smart people, and smart charging are really essential. So the days of old of managing the petrol cars coming in and out of the fleet have gone. We've got to have an understanding of charging infrastructure, of technology and how that works, and the different platforms that are available in the market as well. Because it's not just about the cars, it's about the Ubers, it's about the Limes, the Beams, and the different sharing models that are sitting out there in public transport, as well. So if we look at the numbers, and if we think back to that previous slide about $9 billion being spent in the petrochemical industry, if we look at work charges and the cost of work charges, because many of you, that's a real challenge to put in place, it's going to cost you around $5 every 100 kilometres when your cars are parked and at your work charges. If you've got home charges, if you're charging at night off peak, that's around $2 per 100 kilometres. If you're using public charges, so that's the likes of the Open Loops, the ChargeNets, the Jolts, and there's plenty more coming into the market as well, you're looking at around $15 per 100 kilometres. So if you compare that to a normal petrol car, that's around $18 per 100 kilometres. So at the moment, we've got $9 billion being spent on the petrochemical industry. So if we can really activate smart home charging and smart work charging, we should be able to get that cost down to around $3 billion a year. So that would give us a surplus of, $6 billion into the economy for Kiwis. So that's a huge financial opportunity of electric vehicles. So I hope Simeon Brown's going to be tuning into this, because knocking out the clean car discount certainly isn't popular with, I'd have to say, the Drive Electric contingent, because we've got this great financial opportunity if we could save that $6 billion, but also save that $10.5 billion. That's the social costs that are coming from emissions of ICE vehicles as well. So we've got this great opportunity if we can adopt smart charging into our workplaces and into our home environments. And I'm happy to answer any questions on charging infrastructure. I know there is currently a lot of pressure on the public chargers in New Zealand, and EECA is certainly doing a stellar job at the moment, looking to facilitate an increase in public charging in New Zealand via a lot of additional funding. So we are going to see that change in the New Zealand environment, and more public chargers. But we do have them in 98% of our state highways. We've got public chargers every 75 kilometres, which isn't bad. And if we just look at a case study, I thought it could be interesting. This is Genesis Energy, and this is I hate to use the word journey. It has been a long journey for them, and I guess why we're sharing this with you is we'd hope that some of these learnings can make your journey a lot faster. So they signalled to their staff, giving their staff plenty of time, and engaged with their staff around removing car parks and making them available to their staff. So Genesis no longer have car parks available, and they no longer have cars and salary packages. So those two decisions were made over 18-month, 24-month period. And staff, they were the first business in Auckland to offer a discount on public transport. And for those of you listening, the IRD have released new, the government released new legislation this year, the 1st of April. There's an FBT exemption now on micromobility. So if you are providing scooters or bikes or e-bikes to your staff, or if you were providing them a discount on public transport, you no longer have to pay FBT on that. So that is a real win to try and drive the opportunity for staff to mode shift. So something to consider. And if you wanted any contacts at Auckland Transport on who you'd talk to about offering that to your staff, please let me know. Happy to connect you. On the fleet utilisation, Genesis has been able to reduce their fleet size by 30%. And up until working with Zilch, they had a leasing model, so they haven't been able to transition as many vehicles to EV as they would like. But certainly we're well on the road to getting their fleet to 100% EV, which is exciting. So the Zilch work with them is looking at their total cost of ownership models, which is something we love. We're very data-led, looking at their GPS data and figuring out how can we reduce the fleet size, what are the parts of the fleet that it makes sense to electrify, and then how can we optimise all assets, the EVs and the ICE vehicles, and how can we also adopt mode shift in their business and support their staff. For Genesis, they make their cars available for their staff to book for business bookings during the day, but also private bookings in the evening. So the neat thing about that is they can also earn revenue off their company cars. So when staff, say if you worked for Genesis, you could book a Tesla or an Ioniq 5, pick it up on Friday night, return it Monday morning, pay $140, and a percentage of that goes back to Genesis, so they're earning money off their company cars, and they also have no FBT to pay. So Zilch has got an IRD FBT exemption as well. So this is, you know, mobility as a service model. It's different from an ownership or a leasing model, but certainly with Genesis, they've seen this as a way that they can decrease their fleet costs, but also increase their electrification as well. So that's been an exciting change. Appreciate they've still got a chunk of the rest of their fleet, which is, you know, trucks doing things like deliveries. So that part of their fleet, they've just got one electric truck in there so far, but certainly they have got more in the pipeline as well. So another piece of Zilch's secret sauce is a really high touch support from our customer service team as well. So I just wanted to finish by just a quote from Dr. Rod Carr, the head of our Climate Change Commission, and I think he sums it up really well, just saying how we think about transport as a service, public transport, active mobility, the urban environment is critical to whether we use our capital wisely or with high regret. So thanks guys for tuning in, and I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to have a bit of Q&A.
Thanks, Kirsten. That was great, really interesting, some really useful information and some really interesting points in there. Thank you. So thanks for that. I'll invite Jim, if you want to put your camera back on as well, in case anyone's got any questions that Fleet Coach might want to input in as well. Would be great. If you do have a question, please send it through via the chat or the Q&A, and we've got time for a couple of quick questions. So one very, very quick one was around clarification of what FBT means. So just if there's anyone tuning in who is from outside of New Zealand or listening to the recording from outside.
Sure. So that's fringe benefit tax by the Inland Revenue Department, and that sits around 49 to 64% in New Zealand. So it's quite a significant cost for businesses. And if you're giving a vehicle to your employee to use privately, you pay fringe benefit tax. I can see There's a great question about how do Genesis people get to the office. I'll just jump in there. Genesis have, if we take Auckland for an example, we've positioned Zilch Genesis cars in north, south, east, west, and as well as central. So staff can use public transport or micromobility or drive their own car to get to those locations, pick up a car, use it and return it. They also have the option of taking them home the night before as well.
Great, thanks, Kirsten. Also related to Genesis, around the private bookings system and how that works in terms of insurance too, and whether that's all covered if something happens by the company insurance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is covered by the company insurance, but different businesses have different policies, whether the excess is paid by the employee if they have a private booking. So on the Zilch app, if you've got, you can toggle between a private or a business booking. So people that work for Genesis have a private account, which is set up with their own private credit card, and then they've got the business account, and that just, all those costs get collected and go through to the monthly invoice. The Zilch cards also interface with OpenLoop and ChargeNet public charges as well, like a fuel card.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Kirsten. And what advice or tips would you have, and this could be you as well, Jim, I'll start with Kirsten, but in terms of getting buy-in, because this relates to other safety things too, but buy-in from senior management about looking at sustainability and safety options?
I'd say get me along to talk to them. So I, and it's getting them to understand their part to play, particularly from an ESG lens. I think the landscape, when we first came into the market 8 years ago, ESG wasn't a really big thing, but there's not many boardroom tables that aren't talking about ESG now and sustainability. So I think it's not just your senior leadership team, it's also your executive, your governance team as well play an important part. So part of the Zilch work that we do with the business is one of the things we absolutely do is engage with the CEO, because if the CEO isn't going to lead, so we certainly have very pointy conversations with them.
Exactly the same thing in my work. Everyone talks about safety like going to heaven, but they don't want to kind of pay the price. They don't want to put in the work to get there. And we just need to remind our leaders, our best customers, the senior leaders are in boots and all. Interesting to hear Kirsten's comment about how it's spoken about around the board table. You know, every board has a health and safety agenda item on their monthly board meeting. Doesn't always translate to action, so it's good to simply remind the business leaders, and every employee has the right to ask those questions of their leaders.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks both of you. Another question's come through. NZ public transport system isn't that well developed and could be hard to use for people outside of Auckland, Wellington, or other cities, CBD areas. Yes, completely agree on. One, do your customers meet any rejection from employees who are coming from further away or from in other districts, and are there anything that they do to approach that differently?
I think this talks really well to the Scope 3 product that we're developing. So it looks at how staff are commuting to and from work, and then segments it so you can have more meaningful conversations. There's no point, engaging with staff that live 60 kilometres away about Bike Week or Bike Month, Bike to Work Month, because, it's an unrealistic expectation that they're going to, cycle 60 kilometres. So I think you've got to appreciate that we also don't want to make staff feel guilty about how they're driving and what vehicles they're driving. So if you've got 3 kids to drop off and, 2 cricket bags, and you're picking up 4 kids after school, it's not feasible for you to take public transport. So it's having the conversations and segmenting it within your business so there's more engagement and uptake, and we don't alienate our employees or make them feel guilty for their transport choices, because we have to, as that person pointed out, public transport is really limited in a lot of our in a lot of our smaller cities and towns, but it's helping educate staff. Say if they are a car driver, what the impact can be if they chose a vehicle that had a lower emission or a smaller engine size. So that's certainly part of our Scope 3 product.
Thanks, Kirsten. And a similar thing from a safety perspective too, in terms of choice of vehicles. If the alternatives aren't available, it can often come down to the choice of vehicles and the way that we use them. So yeah, that's great info. Thank you. Great. Right, I'm conscious of the time. We've overrun by a couple of minutes, so I think we'll wrap up there. But thank you everybody that's put questions through. Really appreciate it, and thank you to Jim and Kirsten. I'm just going to share my screen again quickly, and just to wrap up with a couple of our future events so that you're aware of those. So coming up, our calendar of spotlight sessions and other events will be on the Global Fleet Champions website shortly. On the 19th of October, we are running a joint seminar with AFMA, the Australasian Fleet Management Association in Auckland, looking at the future of fleet management, including safety and environmental goals. And we'll also have more spotlight sessions on safe vehicles and grey fleet happening later in the year as well. So keep an eye on the Global Fleet Champions website. If you're not already signed up to the Global Fleet Champions newsletter, go to globalfleetchampions.org and register for free, and you can get the newsletters, which will have further details as well. And also the winners of this year's Australasian Fleet Champions Awards will be announced on the 19th of October at an in-person ceremony and dinner in Auckland, with the ceremony also being available live online too. It's at the same venue as the fleet seminar we've got during the day, so that's running during the day, followed by the awards dinner and ceremony in the evening. And thank you for being part of the webinar and for Global Fleet Champions as well. We are a charity, as I mentioned at the start, and we rely on donations, fundraisers and our corporate supporters like Fleet Coach to help us to continue our work and to share best practice in road risk management and fleet safety, to provide events and resources, and to continue our wider work to prevent road deaths and injuries, make communities safer, and providing free support for people who've been affected by crashes. So if you're able to help us in some way, it is greatly appreciated. You can do that through buying a good gift card or an entertainment membership, becoming a partner, donating, or running a fundraiser for us. And if you'd like to discuss working with us more, then please feel free to contact me or tick the relevant box on the feedback survey when we send that out. So I hope you found today's webinar useful and interesting. I've put a link to the feedback survey, which will be sent out post-webinar. Please do fill it in. It's really useful to have that input in planning future events. Thank you again to Kirsten and Jim for joining in and speaking today, and to all of you for taking part, and we hope to see you at another event again soon. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks.